Hey everybody, it's Joe from greenlightsound.com, and today we're going to take a look at a new plugin from SIR Audio Tools called StandardGATE, which is of course a gate plugin, but has a lot of other flexible features that can be used from anything from standard gating to kind of creative usage as well. Let's dive right into the controls first. First things first, we got three different modes. We've got standard gating here. We've got ducking, where we use a sidechain input to lower the volume of the channel this is on, and upward expansion as well. In the main window right here, we've got sort of a graphic representation of what's going on with the gate over time. So I'll play a snare part. You'll see what I'm talking about. So the lighter part is what's coming through the gate. The darker part's what's being gated. We can put this detector on to really isolate the transients and dial in the threshold exactly for what we need. And the threshold does different things depending on what mode you're in. If you're in gate mode, anything below the threshold gets turned down or off, and anything above the threshold comes through. If you switch it into ducking mode, when the sidechain signal goes above the threshold, then the volume is reduced. And then when you have it in the upward expansion mode down here, when the signal goes above the threshold, that signal is amplified and everything below the threshold stays the same. Let's go back to gate mode right here. You've got a range control right down at the bottom here. And again, this works differently depending on what mode you're in. If you're in gate mode, it's how much quieter the sound is below the threshold when gating. When you're in ducker mode, it's kind of the range of the ducking going on. And in upward expansion, it's how much louder the output is than the input when it's above the threshold. One of the nice things about it when you put it into that upward expansion mode is that the output gain is automatically compensated when you're in that upward expansion mode. So you won't hear clipping or distortion on the channel because of that. In effect, what it'll sound like is the sound below the threshold is getting softer. We've got internal or external sidechain option right over here. And we've got a sidechain EQ over here, which is really nice because we can dial in exactly what frequency ranges are triggering the gate or ducker or upward expansion. On the bottom right, we've got our typical attack, hold, and release controls that are standard on any gate. We've also got the detector right here, the detector knob right to the right of the release knob. When it's in peak, there is no knob control, and that's kind of a standard gate. Except for this plugin has a special adaptation so that signals with low frequency content are also reliably gated. We can switch this to RMS decay and RMS window. That's where the input volume is averaged using the amount of time you choose on the knob right below. And RMS decay is going to be a little smoother sounding with a slower response time than RMS window is. We've got transient detection, of course detects transients. That can also be used to extract transients from a signal and have that blended back in with the dry signal for really punchy sounds. We've got percussive, which is of course tailored to percussive sources, and then peak digital, which is really the same thing as peak minus that low frequency adaptation. We'll just set it on its standard normal peak setting for now. We've got a ratio knob right down here. Of course, in gating mode, if you go to 101, that's a real gate, silent, below the threshold. As you start to move the ratio up higher, it's really turning it into an expander, where anything below the threshold is being reduced but not totally cut out. The knee control smooths that transition between gating and not gating. We've got a filter section right here. D-bleed, this is really a great one for like snare drum, taking out hi-hat bleed within that one. The D-bleed is a high shelf EQ that the gain and frequency decrease through this gate's release. It kind of filters at that high end. You've got low pass and resonant low pass filter, which is kind of similar to D-bleed. The resonant low pass emphasizes the cutoff frequency, so you can kind of use that for creative effects. And you have the same thing in high pass and resonant high pass filter. That one's good for removing low frequency noise like kick drum in a snare mic or something like that. We've got a look ahead control over here, which is great for preserving transients. Of course, adds latency to the signal as well. Oversampling is included, which is nice. You can either have it off or 2, 4, or 8 times. We can have the detection be based upon the mid, side, left, or right signal, and we can also process separately the mid, side, left, and right signal. You've got MIDI input for sort of creative effects triggered by MIDI signals. Got a dry, wet slider right over here. Interface is resizable, which is always nice in a modern plugin. And we can even change the appearance to different color schemes. This one looks pretty cool. I'm going to leave it like that for now. All right, so let's try it out on some audio. The first thing is going to be a really typical gating situation. It's a snare drum that's got a little bit of kick drum bleed and a little bit of hi-hat bleed in it as well. I'm going to start with the plugin bypassed, just hear the plain, dry snare drum signal. Get the idea? A little bit of kick drum, a little bit of hi-hat. Let's try to dial it in with some gating now. Actually, this color scheme makes it a little bit harder to read, so let's go back to our default. Let's put that look ahead on. So you can hear when I turn that filter off, you get a little bit more of that top end in. D-bleed really gets rid of that hi-hat spill. We could kind of do the same thing with the EQ. There we go. Let's change this to RMS decay and see what happens when we do the average signal. So you can hear you kind of lose the transient at the beginning just a little bit. How about transient? We'll try it on percussive. You can see playing with the EQ can really affect what's being gated. Really nice. All right, let's check it out on kick drum next. I'm going to bypass the plugin first. Here's the kick part totally dry. A little bit of snare bleed in that. You can see how you can either turn it totally off or bring that lower level up. Let's put it into upward expansion. It's really kind of hard to mess this one up. It really does a nice job of typical gating uses. Let's put it back in gate mode, but this time I'm going to move it to transient. I'm going to totally emphasize the snap here by having a really quick hold and release time. I'm going to put that output gain up a little bit. All we're getting is a click here. I'm going to bring this dry wet slider all the way down and kind of dial in that click sound into the dry signal. It's a nice way to add a little bit of extra snap to the beginning of the signal. So it really does a fantastic job of all these standard gating usages. And of course we can use ducking and upward expansion too. Tons of flexible controls. We can use it creatively if we want to. So highly recommended StandardGATE from SIR Audio Tools. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already so we can keep you in the loop as to what's coming up next. And I'll see you in the next one.